en desarrollarse como fotógrafos o fotoperiodistas o documentalistas, pues bueno, cuenten con este espacio. Esta plática justamente se inscribe en este nuevo impulso y estamos muy agradecidos con Canon, con WordPress Photo por la oportunidad de tener esta charla. Entonces, si les parece bien, vamos a comenzar. Jorge, Lawrence, please. Would you please come forward? Thank you. Bien, pues como les digo, estamos en verdad muy agradecidos con Canon México por la oportunidad de tener aquí a Lawrence Korteweg, quien es responsable de las exposiciones de WordPress Photo a nivel mundial, es decir, se encarga de la curaduría. Nos explicará qué es WordPress Photo, la historia y la actualidad del fotoperiodismo. Para quienes no saben, pues a partir de hoy, si no me equivoco, está abierta al público la exposición en el Museo Franz Mayer para que vayan a verla. Es sin duda una selección de lo más representativo del fotoperiodismo a nivel mundial y bueno, ya nos estará platicando Lawrence al respecto. Sin más, nuevamente agradecer, bueno, también a ustedes chicos su asistencia y pues comenzamos con Jorge, quien nos hará una presentación general de lo que estamos aquí y después con Lawrence. Lawrence, thank you very much for being here.
Bueno, muchas gracias Pablo, muchas gracias a todos. La verdad, la parte que yo voy a platicarles es un poco más protocolaria, no es tan interesante como la que les va a platicar obviamente Lawrence, pero la idea es explicarles por qué estamos aquí como Canon y por qué nace la alianza con WordPress Photo. Como bien comentaba Pablo, la foto documental, hay una tendencia muy fuerte en todo México y en todos los países en donde la gente se está acercando más a la fotografía. Y el propósito principal de Canon es acercar a todo mundo más a la cultura fotográfica. Un dato nada más es, por ejemplo, en el año 2010 se vendieron 2 millones de cámaras, hoy se venden nada más 600,000 cámaras. Sin embargo, la gente que tiene acceso a las cámaras, hoy son 80 millones de personas y en aquel entonces nada más eran 10 millones de personas. La idea que nosotros tenemos como Canon es que todas las personas que utilizan dispositivos móviles para hacer fotografía puedan en algún momento incrementar su interés por la fotografía y así nosotros como proveedores de cámaras fotográficas, entonces pues compren más equipo. Esa es como la idea de fondo de todo esto, pero en realidad lo que nosotros tratamos de hacer y la cultura fotográfica es muy difícil de desarrollar porque no todo el mundo tiene el mismo interés. Entonces, cuando nosotros pensamos en qué es lo que le interesa a la gente, tratamos de inicio no de vender un producto, tratamos de vender el resultado. Entonces, eso es la fotografía. Y lo que nosotros queremos es acercar a todos a la cultura fotográfica. Ese es nuestro interés principal en este momento en Canon. Nuestro objetivo es que todos tengan más interés por la fotografía. Por eso mismo nosotros desarrollamos muchos programas dentro de Canon para poder apoyarles. Por ejemplo, si ustedes en su carrera compran una cámara fotográfica, nosotros les damos cursos gratis para que aprendan a usar esa cámara fotográfica y no pierdan tiempo en cosas que no deben. O tenemos comunidades en donde pueden probar fotografía, irse a tomar foto de paisaje con nuestros fotógrafos, con nuestros embajadores y todo esto es gratis. Entonces, lo único que necesitan hacer pues, es acercarse a Canon. Parte de lo que nosotros estamos haciendo es esta alianza con WordPress Photo, que viene desde 1992. Es una alianza que utilizó Canon Europa con WordPress Photo. Y lo que se pretende es, hay alianzas muy naturales. Por ejemplo, hay una asociación que se llama Ojos que Sienten, no sé si alguien haya escuchado de ella. Es personas con debilidad visual, algunos de ellos incluso ciegos, que hacen foto. Entonces, nosotros lo que decimos es que se tiene que hacer la foto con el corazón. Todas estas personas con debilidad visual hacen foto con el corazón. Entonces, la alianza natural en ese caso es que nosotros proveemos las cámaras y ellos hacen la fotografía y hacemos exposiciones en donde platicamos que la fotografía se hace desde el corazón. En el caso de WordPress Photo, lo natural que sucedió es que los equipos que nosotros tenemos necesitan estar en condiciones extremas, tanto de enfoque como velocidad de disparo, como sensibilidad a la luz, etcétera. Y por eso es que los periodistas prefieren nuestra marca. Entonces, cuando utilizan nuestra marca, nosotros dijimos, bueno, vamos a apoyarles para que se pueda hacer la exhibición también de los resultados que ellos toman. Y eso es como nació en 1992 la alianza de WordPress Photo con Canon. Entonces, Pues hoy nuestro objetivo con WordPress Photo es llevar esta exhibición a más lugares para que pues se crezca el interés por la fotografía. Y hoy se está logrando algo más con la Universidad Iberoamericana, en donde pues traemos a Lawrence, bueno, y Lawrence también vino por su cuenta, para platicarnos más de lo que es el WordPress Photo y las fotografías que estamos viendo. Ha habido muchos años en donde muchos mexicanos han ganado premios del WordPress Photo y también mucha gente que convoca dentro del WordPress Photo. Entonces, sin más, les dejo con Lawrence para que les platique este año cómo fue el WordPress Photo y también lo que hace el WordPress Photo. Entonces, thank you very much, Lawrence. So, all yours.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jorge. Thanks very much, Canon. We try to increase the impact of WordPress Photo by doing things like this, so I'm very happy that so many of you turned up so early, so many of you could have been in their bed and they chose to be here, so thank you very much for this. So I don't speak Spanish, I hope you all speak English. Is that okay? Yes. Okay, awesome. So just to start, how many of you know WordPress Photo? Are we talking? No? Yes? Yeah, do you know? Have you ever heard about WordPress Photo? Okay, that's good. So, what we will do today, well, we're a photography foundation, so we're going to look at photos, of course. Some of the history, some of the changes that we're going through, and I also want to talk about the Mexican situation when it comes to press freedom. But first of all, I will shortly introduce WordPress Photo and myself. So I'm Laurens Korteweg from Holland, a very Dutch name I have. WordPress Photo is a Dutch foundation founded in 1955 by a group of Dutch photojournalists who wanted to raise awareness for international photography. And we've been doing the same since 1955, actually. So we're trying to promote, or we try to raise awareness for photography in general. We want to give the credits that the journalists deserve. We want to make the people aware of the fact that there's people behind the camera. And, well, especially, of course, now the photography world is changing. The journalism world is changing. More and more people are working as freelancers, which brings huge risks with them. And we try to raise awareness for this. And we also try to raise awareness for press freedom. This exhibition travels to 90 different locations every year, 90 different cities, 40 different countries. And everyone, so our 3 to 4 million visitors, they all look at the same information. So it's all the same photos, the same explanations, and that is very important to us. So if you see our exhibition, everyone in the world sees the same exhibition. And in this way, we think this is a good example of uncensored journalism. I don't know whether if you've seen the winner of this year, the WordPress Photo of the Year. It's about homosexuality. So as you can imagine, in some countries, this was not easy for people to look at. So for example, countries in the Middle East, they contacted us and they said, oh, we really want to have the exhibition. We love it, we love WordPress Photo, but not that one photo. They say, okay, can we have the exhibition without that photo? And then that is the moment when we say no, it's all or nothing, so we're not going to censor it. Sometimes we try to come up with creative solutions. For example, in Tehran, in Iran, we came up with a solution that we're going to have the exhibition in Tehran, but the one photo about homosexuality was on display, or was going to be on display in the Dutch embassy, because the Dutch embassy is Dutch soil. So in this way, we came up with a creative solution. So I will try to make it a little interactive today. So if you have any questions, just interrupt me, speak out. I will really happily answer your questions. Let me have a look. So let's first start with some photos that you probably know and that you might know WordPress Photo from. So this one. Anyone familiar with this photo? Cool. So the men in front of the Tiananmen, of the tanks in Tiananmen Square. The photos that I show now, also this one, the girl running away from the napalm attack. This one, ever seen it before? The execution in Vietnam. These are all the iconic images. So these are the images that are part of our collective memory. This is what, if we look at Tiananmen Square, this is what one person can do. One person can apparently stop 4 tanks or more. And they are so important in our visual collective memory, or in our collective memory, that they became icons. So whenever we think about resistance, acting against the government, we think about this brave man with his plastic shopping bag. Sorry for this. So what you many times see, what defines many times a good photograph is that it's about the decisive moment. If we look at this one, for example, it's about the expressions on the people's faces. There, if you see it, you feel it, and it's the same for this one. I mean, apparently the war was so bad that for no apparent reason you could easily execute a person. Talking about the decisive moment, this one, for example, I don't think many of you know it. Maybe? You do? All right, okay. It's interesting. So it's all about the decisive moment. It's about this split second that you need to take the photo. If it would have been 1 second before or 1 second after, it would have been something completely different. So this is also World Press Photo of the Year, 1975. And we will show, or I will show some more to you. There will be some developments, of course. From a certain moment on, we started accepting colored photos. And from a certain moment, we started accepting digital files. And some more photos from the decisive moment. So an execution, or not an execution, an attack on a Japanese politician. Just on stage in front of the cameras, and also, again, the decisive moment. If you look at there is a pointer, huh, Pedro? Yes. How does it work? Is it the middle button?
The red one.
Okay, thanks. So if we look, you see the sword here? So he's about to execute this politician, and well, especially back in the days, these were the photos that made our history. Nowadays, it's not easier to make such a photo, but everyone has a camera. So we probably all consider ourselves photographers. I'm pretty sure you all have an iPhone or some other camera on your telephone. But this was still very, very special in those days. What we're looking at here is the first World Press Photo of the year, 1955. When I first saw it, I was like, oh, okay, so someone fell off his bike. But 1955, 60 years ago, so someone managed to take this photo. Nowadays, of course, there's if you go to a motocross, if you go to a football game, there's hundreds of photographers. But back in the days, I mean, cameras were more expensive. There were not so much and so many journalists, or not so many photographers. So that's why this was such an important photo. It's a sports photo. If you look at the history of World Press Photo, there have not been a lot of sports photos that were nominated as the World Press Photo of the Year. There's one other, 1958. As you can see, back in those days, well, the requirements for a World Press Photo of the Year were a little different. So a football player in the rain. If we continue, we get to something interesting. I want to reflect with this presentation on what World Press Photo is, and also put it into the right context, in the context of the fact that we are a Western organization. So we were founded in Holland, we're still in Holland, and I think this is something very important to keep in mind, that we are Western. I will zoom in on it a little more. We try to be, of course, as inclusive as possible, but sometimes it's just really hard if you're always thinking in a Dutch perspective. So this photo, so we have, till now we have, I've been organizing 58 contests, and this is the only person of color to ever win the World Press Photo of the Year. So this was a colored photographer. And why I'm pointing this out is that this might reflect on the fact that we are a Western organization. Now I'm going to show you 4 photos, and I want to ask you to see if you see any connections. So there's this one, there's this one, this one, and the last one. Do any of you see any connections between these 4 photos? War, yeah? Yeah. Yeah, yeah, true. But if you look at the people in the picture, it's all women. Or in every photo there is at least one woman. And these 4 photos are all taken by female photographers. So these are the only 4 female photographers to ever win the World Press Photo of the Year. So out of 58 contests, there's 4 female photographers. So we're not even talking about 10%. But this might also be a reflection on the industry. If you look at the entries every year that we receive for the contest, we receive about 100,000 photos. About 15%, only 15% comes from female photographers. And this again might be very interesting to well, at least to realize. Maybe if you compare the way photographers shoot, there might be a gender difference. If you look at this is all very emotional. It's all about, it's not so direct, so there's not the true horror that you see, so it's not as explicit as you are maybe used to, but it is, it's more implicitly framed. So this might be an effect of the fact that this is taken by a female photographer, that they want to make you think in other ways. But this is just my theory, might be completely different, so if you have another theory, just speak out. This one, ever seen before? So this one, it's only 4 years old, so it's too early to really talk about an iconic image. But I think it will grow into an iconic image over time. If you look at the girl, it's just such a beautiful portrait, and now you only see the fact that she lost her nose, only because she fled her husband, only because she ran away, and of course the husband didn't like this, and for this fact she lost her nose, but also her ears, and you cannot even see that on this picture. Luckily she had some plastic surgery, so she has, well, she got her nose back. Then, again, some photos with some connections, and maybe you can see it. So there's this one, the gorilla in Yemen. So these 3, do you see any connections? Death. Yeah? Suffering. And maybe you also see some Christian iconography. If you, for example, look at this, but also some sort of a crucifixion. And here, many people, when they saw this photo, they were reminded of the Pietà. And this might also, again, be related to the fact that we are a Western organization. So these are Christian values. So, for example, if we would have had an Eastern perspective, we would have had different winners, because their perspective is not coming from Christianity. And so I'm not criticizing World Press Photo with this, but just try to make you aware that what you see, everything is just defined by who judges. So we have a jury. We work with a jury every year, an independent jury. And these people are all individuals that are not connected to World Press Photo. And we try to bring in as many new and different perspectives as possible. So when it comes to nationality, when it comes to culture, when it comes to religion, But then you are confronted with the fact that the photography world is also still a Western world. So all the big most big festivals are taking place in the Western world. And of course there are photographers from Africa, but many times they work in Europe. And this is just something important to realize. It's about news value. If we continue, just let me quickly look at my notes, if I have any. Yeah, some photos that I will show you. And let's see if you can find some connections. So this one, and it's about this detail, the little feet, and this one. Sorry? Yeah. Some more? Well, motherhood is actually the most important one. So it's also in photography, it's also about something that we can easily relate to, and for that fact, think it's a good photo. So everyone knows this feeling. Everyone can relate to this moment. And the interesting thing also is if you look at these photos, especially these two, now they might be some sort of a stereotype to bring the story of famine or a war or conflict to the world. Just show a mother with a child in a bad situation, and we can easily relate to it. But that's interesting to see. So what we like in photography is also changing. Because at least for me, this is some sort of a stereotypical image that is also a little easy. I mean, there's no, it doesn't feel like there's a deeper thought in the photographer. It's really directly showing the effects of something, but for me, it's not the most creative way. So we see it also in the contest. So there is more creativity within the photographers, and that's also caused by the fact, of course, that there are so many photographers. So the competition is huge. Everyone can afford a DSLR, so a big camera these days, and everyone can sell their photos to agencies. So this is a big threat to the conventional photojournalists or the journalists. Then if we continue, so the jury, of course, has a huge impact on what we see. And sometimes the jury takes a certain position and tries to make a statement. So here we're looking at a photo that was just taken before the wall. The wall in Europe was going to fall in 1809. And the jury thought, okay, we need to award a photo from the eastern side of the wall. And in this way, we try to encourage photojournalists in that region to keep on working. But the sad thing was, unfortunately, they awarded this photo and they hoped it was going to be an Eastern European photojournalist, but it turned out to be an American. But that's something the jury tries to do, so also try to make a statement. So again, if you look at this year's winner by Mads Nissen, the two men in the picture, we've been also criticized for this choice, because there was the IS was going on everywhere. The war in Syria was going on. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict was still there. The plane was downed in the Ukraine. There was a war in the Ukraine. So many people say, well, that was the real news story. So that should have been awarded the World Press Photo of the Year to give that more attention. But the jury awarded another very important thing, especially since we had the Olympics in Russia, and the homophobia there is growing and growing a lot, and therefore they decided to, next to the fact, of course, that they thought it was a brilliant photo, to award this photo of Mads Nissen the World Press Photo of the War, which was not directly about an important news event, but more like a contemporary issue. What is next? So here you can see some sort of the same thought of the jury. This is coverage from an earthquake in Iran. And back in those days, it was not in 2002. It was not the most important event if you want to prioritize or make a hierarchy in events. But also with this choice, they try to motivate journalists to sort of go against globalization. So not only go for the big story. So not only go in these days go to Syria or go to Israel and Palestine. No, also bring the other stories to the world. Then this, anyone familiar with this photo? So this one was actually the first photo, the first World Press photo of the year, 1986. That was not about a news-related event. This is about a development in society. This man, he suffers from HIV/AIDS, and that was, how do you say that? That was on the, well, it was increasing a lot. There was a lot of HIV/AIDS, and then the jury decided, like, okay, we don't have necessarily always have to focus on the news. We can also focus on contemporary issues, on things developing. So things without huge news value, but that also have a huge impact on society. This, 1967, the first colored World Press photo of the year. So in 1965, we allowed colored photos to be entered in the contest, and 2 years later, this one won. It's also the only Dutch winner ever, so it's our national pride. It's an American soldier in a tank. Now, let me quickly have a look. So, some things I was already talking about, but we have seen a lot of photos now, and well, what makes a photo a good photo? That's hard to say, and that's when I again come back to the Western perspective. So the jury, we try to make it a very broad jury, so with people from all over the place, and we do this because we want to give a very honest view on the world. But sometimes this is just really hard. As I said, the photography world is also some sort of a Western world, so that makes it not easier. So if we're talking about news values, this is actually what defines the news. So what might be a big story in Holland might not be a big story here. So our national elections will probably never make the headlines in Mexico because we're just a super small country that doesn't really matter. But the other way around, if you have elections, we're going to read about it because, well, you're a big country. And what is interesting, when I graduated, I got my Master's of Arts in Media and Society. I wrote my thesis on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I was looking for the fact whether there was a bias towards any of the involved parties or not. So what I did, I did a huge analysis on Dutch newspaper coverage over the past 10 years, and with some automatic mechanisms, I tried to look how the different parties, so the Palestinian people or the Israelis, were described in the news. And the thing you saw many times, for example, that whenever there was an attack from the Palestinian side, and this is just like a very general example, but just to show, they were described as terrorists. Well, the other way around, if the IDF did something, the Israeli soldiers, they were peacekeepers. So what exactly is the difference? And how do you describe this wall that separates the West Bank? Is that just a wall? Is that a protection wall from the Israeli perspective, or is this an apartheid wall? And the way they describe this has a huge influence on how we see it. So for that fact, it's really important to, whenever you read a newspaper actually, just make sure you think about it yourself, because I found a huge pro-Israel bias in our big three newspapers, and that has to do with many things. And if we bring in news value again, Israel is just way closer to us. It's also a Western society, whereas the Palestinians are a Middle Eastern society. We cannot easily relate to them. They are different. We don't trade with them so much. So Israel is a big trade partner of us, whereas the Palestinians are not, because they're not allowed to. But, well, I don't want to make this into a political story, but this is something I just want to show, that this Western perspective, you probably find in Wilper's photo. We try to fight against it, but it's really hard. So, this infographic, you see it start from 1986 from the left, it goes to 2012. And, well, as you can imagine, in 1955, when we first started, it was like maybe a few hundred entries, just nothing actually. But the more and more popular we became, the more entries we received. And of course, the huge increase came when we started accepting digital files. Now we're only accepting digital files, but just to show how it was done, this was before we accepted digital files. So you can imagine if you receive 50,000 prints, you need some space. So what we did, KLM was our sponsor back then, and we were able to use a huge hangar of them, where we had kilometers of photos, and the jury just had to walk and say yes, in and out, and that took ages. So now, this is how we do it. Very easy, one screen. These two in the back are doing the checks, so like a very extensive administration. But it's just a screen and in or out. So this year we had 100,000 photos. You can imagine it takes some time to bring this down. But then the good thing is the people in the jury many times are very experienced editors. So they receive thousands and thousands of photos in their inbox every day. So when we started doing the judging, the first rounds, there was 1.5 seconds per photo. It was just in or out, in or out, in or out, in or out. And of course, the further we got, the more time there was per photo. And well, as you can imagine, especially the last rounds were the most interesting ones when they were going to choose the Wilper's photo of the year. Then you enter the really interesting discussions, and you also see the different perspectives. Something else. Who remembers this photo from 2 years ago? There was a group of Palestinian men in the streets of Gaza City, and they were carrying the bodies of 2 dead children. So there was a very impactful photo, but the problem was there was a huge suspicion of the photographer having manipulated the photo. So many people said the shadows in the picture, they cannot be real. So people started analyzing the photo, but the problem is that many amateurs try to analyze the photo. So we saw many weird analyses of people judging the photographer. And of course, we also researched it ourselves, and he did not manipulate the photo, but of course he used Photoshop. All the photos you see in our exhibition, they have been Photoshopped. And that might be a big surprise for you or not, but it's just within the accepted industry standards. So if we go back to the time that we were still shooting with film, you were also able to do some small adaptations. You could also play with the brightness. And so this has been going on forever. But the problem with the...
Yeah, sorry, Lawrence.
No.
What are the limits of digital manipulation, especially like digital developed in the image? Like, how much is allowed in terms of exposition and contrast and this sort of thing?
Well, that's a very good question, and that's well, that's an issue we are still working on, because it's just impossible to describe everything you can do or you cannot do, because Photoshop has a million options. So the bottom line, the very easy bottom line, is that you cannot alter the content of the photo. So you cannot add anything or take anything away. But as you can imagine, if you play with some options in Photoshop with the brightness, if you just pull them far enough, you can also make things disappear. So in this way, you can also change reality. So this year, what we did, we asked all the photographers who were still in the contest from the penultimate round. You want to say something? Oh, sorry. from the round before the final round, to submit their original files, and then we compared them to the submitted files, so the files they entered in the contest. And based on that comparison, we had to disqualify 22% of the remaining photographers. And that was just a shocking surprise for us. 22, so that's almost 1/4 who did some things that were going too far. So some people actually altered the content, so took things away or added things. And many times, if you look at it, it's just not adding anything to the quality of the photo. There was a picture of a very colored kid, so his skin was very black, and apparently he had a scar. And the photographer decided to take this scar away because it was not perfect enough. But in this way, you are changing reality, and it's not even a very important detail. But then we had to disqualify this photographer. But also many times it was just very poor Photoshop skills that disqualified them. So they tried to crop the image so that all the lines were vertical to make it more perfect, the photo. But they forgot to do the little right corner. So you had all straight lines and then one line like this. And we were like, the jury was like, how can you do this? It's just stupid. It's just how can you do that? Just think about it when you do it. What is going to be next? Yes. So what I said, the world of photography is changing. So everyone can call himself a citizen journalist now. And there's, of course, different sides to this. It's been an amazing development, especially when you look at, for example, the Arab Spring. The coverage of the citizen journalists, they added a lot to our perspective on what was happening, because it was sometimes just not possible for professional photojournalists to be there. But on the other hand, this is also a threat to professional photographers, because many of the newspapers, agencies, they turn to these citizen journalists because they are just cheaper. I mean, you can buy a photo for 50 euros, whereas if you send someone on an assignment, it's thousands of euros. So photographers also realize this, and they start working in different settings. So they try to change their way of working. So if we look at this photo, it's by Pietro Masturzo, and he just found his own way of working. So he came up with his own agency. He didn't want to be involved with the big agencies because they were not going to pay enough. So he created his own agency, and this made him win the World Press Photo of the Year. Looking at Tehran, Iran, the women you see, the blurs, they are protesting or they are demonstrating, but they were not allowed to go on the streets because there was a night curfew. So what they did every night, they went to the roof and they started screaming. This was their way of protesting, and Pietro photographed it in this way, and it's just a beautiful image. The same here, Remy Oichlik. He was also fed up by the conservative way of working, so he also found his own agency. He was 22, 23 years old, so normally from the traditional way of thinking, way too young, way too inexperienced to be able to do something good. But then he came up with his own idea. Unfortunately, he died at a very young age while covering a war. But there is more. So photographers are, there's many people who say photographers are not photographers. Photographers are everything. So they're editors now, they're writers now, they also use video now. And the more and more multimedia productions you see, and this is one example of it. It's by actually a Dutch photographer, but she has a Finnish surname and I cannot pronounce it, but her first name is Ilvi. And she won with this production both in the photo contest as well as in the multimedia contest that we organize. So that was something very big. This is the multimedia production, Afrikaner Blood. Has a huge Dutch connection, of course. We are still connected to South Africa, and she made this series on it. This is also very cool. It's another Dutch photographer, and this is the first crowd-funded winner ever. So this is called the Sochi Project, and it was started sort of from the moment on that they knew the Olympics were going to take place in Sochi. At the moment that they decided it was going to be Sochi, Russia was not in good shape at the time, and this is some sort of a protest against it. They were about to have their their premiere, so their opening in Moscow, and 2 days before they were denied access to the country. So then they came up with an alternative opening in Amsterdam, and they screened it in Moscow, again as some sort of a protest. So we were talking about citizen journalism. Our contest is only open to professional photojournalists. But we do acknowledge the fact that citizen journalists also have a huge impact on society. So what there is a possibility for the jury to come up with a special mention. And that's a photo or an award for a photo that has been made by a citizen journalist that could not have been made by a professional photojournalist. So here, this is a still from a video. This is the result of a demonstration. There were no journalists, it was too dangerous. And this is not something new. Here we see the last hours of Gaddafi before he was found. There were no professional photojournalists. Libya was way too dangerous. But this was huge, of course. Gaddafi was arrested and murdered. And to acknowledge this fact, but also to award citizen journalism, this has been awarded. But it's not new. This was also a special mention. So we're talking 1969. So awarded to NASA for this photo. So as I told, if we're talking about technology, well, back in the days, there were not so many options on your camera, and you could not alter the images with Photoshop. But now you can. So blurred lines. It brings in new challenges for the jury, as in what is still a photo and what is just an automatic or a mechanically produced image. Well, this, for example, and nowadays, of course, very popular with whatever social media you're using. But back then, still pretty new. Same for this. But also this one, this is the first iPhone winner ever in this year's context. This also brings in new things. So I have to say, we were not the first. So there's also another photo competition called Picture of the Year International. That's an American contest, and they already awarded someone in 2011 with an iPhone photo. So we're a bit late. But here is another blurred line. So there was this photographer, and right after Google Street View was launched, he started looking on Google Street View for funny situations, or funny, how do you call it, interesting situations. So he saw this, and he saw people kissing on the car, or people running around naked. And he thought, well, this is very interesting, but if you want to enter the contest, you have to make a photo. So you cannot make a print screen. So what he did, he just made a photo of the screen, and he entered that into the contest, and he won. So that's also a very creative way of doing photography. Another interesting dilemma is photographers who are assigned by NGOs, for example, by Greenpeace. In this way, you get assigned from a certain perspective. And so is this still objective photography? Or are we looking at propaganda? And this is something that there's no clear answer to it. It's just up to the jury to decide. Same here, assigned by Greenpeace. Such a powerful photo, deforestation, the world is changing, we're losing oxygen, but from a certain perspective. Then, manipulation. This is a good example of manipulation. We're looking at a hand. Here we look at the bigger picture. So this is what he sent in. This is the original picture. But the cropping and using black and white, that's what is accepted. The problem is that if you look here, you see something between his two fingers. And that's the foot of this man. But then if you look at the photo he sent in, there's no foot. It's been taken away because he didn't like the food, he didn't like whatever, so he took it away, and for that reason we had to disqualify him. Then to this year, I don't know whether you know the story, but we disqualified a winner after he was awarded the award. It was a an Italian photographer, and it was about a city in Belgium. It's called Charleroi. And this city, he named his series, so his photos, he named the Dark Heart of Europe. And it is a little bit the dark heart of Europe. It used to be an industrial town. Now the people leave it. It feels a little abandoned, sort of a theme park. So right after we awarded this photo with the award, we got a 5-page letter from the mayor of Charleroi, of this city, protesting against the award and the very simple perspective that the photographer was showing. But this is something that is not, well, it's important to us, of course. We don't want to offend the mayor of Charleroi. But this sparked some debate. So then people started doing their own research. And if you look at this photo, you cannot see it that well, but there's 2 persons in the car. And they're having sex. And that's completely all right. But then apparently it is the nephew of the photographer who said, well, maybe if you just go in the car and do your thing, I can make a photo. And the nephew was okay. But so it was staged. So this is a blurred line. Also, if you look at the fact that the bodies, they are lit from beneath. So I don't know whether one of you has a car with a light in the seats. I don't. So apparently he installed a flash there to make it look more interesting. So then we're talking about staging. But in the end, the fact for which he got disqualified is the fact that he said that all the photos were taken in Charleroi, in the city of Charleroi. But some people found out that one of the photos was taken in another city, in Molenbeek, near Brussels. And whenever you enter the contest, you need to provide us with the right information. You need to know where the picture has been taken. So some people proved that, and then we disqualified them. According to many people in the photography world, this should have also been the reason to disqualify the photographer. Right. How much time is there left? Is that? 1 hour. Okay, so I hope you do have a lot of questions, because I only have 20 more minutes. So Mexico and World Press Photo. Long history. We go a long way back. So in DF for the first exhibition, 1989, and now we are in the Museo of Franz Meyer for the 16th time in a row. And the exhibition here is one of the most popular ones in the world. It's really amazing. We have 90 different exhibitions worldwide, and some of them are wonderful. But as you can imagine, if you bring this exhibition to a very small city in Germany, well, there's less enthusiasm. But Mexico City sort of goes crazy when the exhibition comes here. Was any of you yesterday, by any chance, at the opening? No. Is any one of you going to the exhibition?
How long is it going to be here?
Till the 27th of September, so you got 4 weeks. Should be enough. But yeah, so within the next 4 weeks there will be 45,000 visitors, which is amazing. The press attention has been overwhelming, but most importantly, this is important for me. So talk about it. Talk about what we do, why we do it, and what we can change, if we can change anything. So I'm very, very honored to be here. These are some of the other cities where we've been on display, but now, in collaboration with Convergencia, we are expanding. So next year, we only need a signature, and then everything is going to be all right. Next year, we're going to go to Puebla, and we try to go to Guadalajara, and we want to go to León. And we do this because we think it's extremely important, because we promote press freedom and the free flow of information. And Mexico has a very negative record when it comes to this. I've done some research. Reporters Without Borders ranks Mexico as number 152 out of 180 countries they monitor. And they do this based on, for example, government influence, direct threats to journalists, etc. But also self-censorship, if you can measure this. The Freedom House describes Mexico as one of the most dangerous countries for journalists to work in. And if I remember correctly, 32 journalists have been killed since 1992, simply for the fact that they were doing their job. So this is very depressing, and we want to, with this exhibition, we think it's a good tool to start a conversation, to start talking about this, to raise awareness, because we know the exhibition is not going to change the situation, but being aware is going to change some things, we hope. So that's why we do this. Many times when I'm here, this is my third time in Mexico City, and during the press conference, I always get questions about these stereotypical images that win in the contest. So, for example, this one, last year's photo by Christopher Vanegas, a very cruel photo, especially if you consider the fact that right here there was a high school, and this photo was shot at 7:30, and the students were going to come in at 8. So the photographer, Christopher, said, oh, of course, this was a deliberate choice. It's just to spread fear around the country. This one, Javier Manzano, also awarded the Pulitzer Prize, but this is in Syria. Amazing shot. And then before, Pedro Pardo, again, shot in Mexico. So I do understand the question of this stereotypical view. So many of you might be offended by this. And I have to say that, again, if you look at news values, what we read in Holland, in my country, in a newspaper about Mexico, there's most of the times it's about the narcotráfico, or it's about corruption, or it's about the World Cup, the Holland-Mexico match. And this, I understand this is very problematic, but that's also the problem with news and news values. What is news? As we see news in the world now, and I think that's very problematic, it sort of almost has to be negative. It always is negative. It always shows the negative sides, whereas there's also many positive things to show. But I don't know how the newspapers in Mexico are. In Holland, they are very depressing. So if I wake up at 7 and I read the newspaper, I want to go back to bed because it's just a depressing thing. So this is sort of the message that is the reason that I am working for World Press Photo. I love photography. It's really nice to look at photos. I think it's important to promote the work of photographers. It's important to make sure that everyone knows that photographers are taking huge risks. But this, for me, is just is key. We need uncensored information because we need information to build our own opinions and to construct our own knowledge. So this is just a very quick image on press freedom in the world. So you can imagine black is not so good and white is better, which is also a kind of an interesting principle, the black negative and white positive, but let's not go into that. So Mexico, red, probably no surprise to you. So what I just said, some information. And well, spreading this message around the world with this exhibition, talking about it, so not only showing the exhibition, but also organizing workshops about photography, about press freedom, about the impact of news in our world is why I think World Press Photo is still relevant, except for awarding the photographers with the best prizes. And that brings me to the end. And now I'm very happy to answer all your questions. And now I know this moment from when I still was a student. So someone asks for questions and everyone is silent. But I'm not gonna leave before I answered 5 questions, so you better come up with something.
You were telling about the positive side, about the photography and the news.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if there's gonna be an area for you to show these positive sides in this contest.
Yeah, well, that's something that I would really like. we used to have, for example, the category arts and entertainment. So that were shots of, I don't know, random clowns or funny people or funny situations. But we had to discontinue this for the fact that the quality of the work entered in that category did not make it to the standard of the other categories. But I would very much be in favor of such a category, but if you can imagine, I'm just a project manager, and I'm not the boss yet, so if I will become, I'm going to change it. You're welcome.
In some situations, can the photographer, because they are in like really aggressive situations, can they get hit or something? Like in, for example, a prostitute.
A prostitute?
When they take a picture.
Yeah.
And they like go and slap them, or they ask for permission, or how do they do the photo?
So you mean how they ask permission, or?
No, like in the risky situations, they get like people get angry with them, or
Yeah.
some reaction.
Well, that's also probably the fact why we need professional photojournalists, because you simply cannot go to Syria without any knowledge or without any safety training. You never know how they're going to react. So if we look at the photo from 2 years ago, this funeral procession in the Gaza Strip, you need experience to be able to estimate what is going to happen, because people died, and this brings in some anger. And I can imagine that if I am burying my kids, I don't want any cameras. I don't want any photojournalists. I would just want to be there in the moment. But this photographer, for example, has been working for 12 years in the Gaza Strip, so he is experienced. But it's just, well, it's your gut feelings, I guess. Yeah.
Like you said earlier, photographers are doing different things, like media. So nowadays, do you think it's really necessary to specialize in journalism?
Yeah, well, I still think it's very important to specialize in journalism, as in to know how you should report. Because sometimes many people think that everyone can be a journalist. I don't believe that. You need at least some basic thoughts on what being a journalist is. It's just important because it's all about reliability of the information. So when I read something, I want to be sure that what I read is at least partly true, because I always have my own, I always think about it myself. But I think some basics are needed indeed, and I don't know whether you need well, I don't know. It's different for everyone, and everyone is a different journalist. It also depends on whether you're going to do news or whether you do arts and entertainment. It just also depends on your interest, I guess.
I'd like to extend that question in terms not only of journalism itself, but what about vehicles for journalism? This is different media.
Yeah.
So perhaps not specializing as a photographer. This place used to be where you are now, were photography labs, and now there are like digital convergence. So I think the question goes on that side. So it's not, you can be a journalist, but is it enough to be a photojournalist, or you have to like open your horizons?
Well, I don't think it's enough to be a photojournalist, because if you really want to make a living out of being a journalist, about being just like the traditional photojournalist, it's going to be really hard. I mean, it's changing so fast, so there's more and more freelancers, and you get paid by the photo, and you get paid, what is it, 50 euros per photo, so maybe 1,000 pesos? Pesos, sorry, that was really American. 1,000 pesos. So being a photojournalist is not enough, and if I look at the winners, there are still some journalists that are only doing photojournalism, but that's mainly the hardcore news photojournalists. But they are specialists. I mean, what I just said, you cannot just go to Syria and have a good time. You need to be well, you need to be very experienced. And this is something, luckily, that some newspapers are still investing in. So sending their own photojournalists on assignment. Some of the agencies, I believe it was AP, they're not using any photos anymore from freelance journalists or local journalists in Syria. And their reasoning behind this is that they don't want to endanger those people. They say it's too dangerous for those people to work in Syria if you don't have the backup of a big agency. So many journalists in Syria get abducted, and the only reason or the only way most of the times is to come back is to pay money. But if you're just there on your own, you depend on your family, and probably your family does not have enough money, so you need this agency to back you up. But other agencies, they take another stance. They say, okay, but we don't want to discriminate against the local journalists. We think people can judge the own risks they're taking. But it's a very difficult discussion. Oh, sorry.
Do you think world press photo is changing, like lifestyle or society, or it's just taking us into the look of what's happening? Do you think it's changing the world or just showing us what's happening?
Well, it's definitely showing what is happening, and I hope it is changing. But this is something that is very difficult to measure. It also very much depends on who you are. So we have people who visit the exhibition and they're done in like 15 minutes. They just look at the photos. But also people who spend 2 hours in the exhibition, they read every text, they think about it. And we are actually just a vehicle to transmit this information to you. And we cannot really push you into a direction of how you should interpret the information. And but what I think is, I also already pointed out, but I think this is important, to talk about it, to go to universities and just simply talk about it with everyone, share thoughts on what everyone thinks, and in this way play with the information. So you can just go to the exhibition, that's fine, and some people, some people actually, they spend only 15 minutes because they think it's way too explicit. The images are too graphic. So that's also, we get criticized for this a lot. Like, why do you always show the bad sides of the world? But it's our opinion that we should show reality. So we should show how the world really is. And if that involves, if there's wars, we show that. So if there's no wars, we're of course not going to show it, but it's probably not going to happen in our lives.
What advice would you give aspiring photojournalists, especially non-white and maybe female?
So then I'm just gonna follow Stephen Mays. He was the former director of Seven Photo Agency, and he says, just try to pick something you really find interesting and invest a lot of time in knowing your subject, and just get really familiar with the things that you're doing. And he also said, well, you're gonna fail a lot of times. You're gonna do really ugly photos or really ugly text a lot of times, but that's a process that everyone has been through. And by the way, I'm not a journalist, so I'm not saying you should believe me.
You mentioned that the judges of the competition come from different backgrounds and religions, but I was wondering how many of these judges are women?
Good question, and that's something we actually really try to work on, and it's about 40% women, 60% men. And the interesting thing is, by the way, is that many of the photo departments of the big agencies, of the big magazines, have female editors-in-chief. So there is, we're lucky that there's a lot. This year's chair of the jury was Michelle McNally. She's the editor at the New York Times, like a very small lady, chain smoking all the time, drinking a lot, but doing the best work ever. Her daily rhythm is getting up at 4, taking the subway at 5, opening her computer, seeing thousands and thousands of photos. Then she drinks a coffee and she does the same. Then she goes into meetings and she gets home at 9, goes to bed and repeats. And she still loves it. And it's just a wonderful lady. Ah.
Speaking of the whole evolution of photography, does World First Photo have a certain preference for photographers that majored in like journalism or photography or something related to media?
No. During the judging, the jury members do not know anything about the photographer. So there's no name, there's no agency, so it's completely anonymous. Of course, sometimes they're professionals, so they know a lot of the work. But then, if they are involved with a certain photographer, if they have a direct relationship with this person, they have to speak out. So they have to say, okay, I'm involved. So they still can vote, but so you just have to know. But they only know the name of the photographer after they awarded the prizes.
Artistically, WordPress, what does it look in a photograph? And what is its stand on analog technology?
On analog photography? Well, I mean, it doesn't matter so much how you show the information, whatever you use, as long as it's a good photo. And what was your first question?
What do you look on artistically in a photograph?
Well, I think the most important thing is creativity. If you look at this year's photo of the year, it sort of looks like a painting. It's so beautifully composed. And the other example is that I like to use. If you look at there's one photo from the World Cup, from star striker Lionel Messi, and as you can imagine, every game in the World Cup there's hundreds of photographers, but he managed to take a photo of Lionel Messi, who was just walking past the World Cup with a very sad face, because he again did not play well, and again he screwed up the tournament. So this is what he tried to show. And that's creativity. You can make action photos, but you're most probably not going to win. But if you look at another photo of this year's sports category, there's a photo of Albello, a very well-known sports photographer, and he managed to capture this moment where this Beckham guy during an American football match catches this ball with his 3 fingers. And well, I'm not an expert, so I was like, oh, well, okay, nice. But apparently it was a very, very, very good catch, and it photographed in such a good way that this is an action photo, but then it's a very special thing to photograph. So that's, I hope that answers your question.
Could you tell us a word about how did you arrive to WordPress?
Yeah, luck, just luck. So I studied business administration. I got an MBA in marketing, and I also have a master's in media and society. And I think this combination nowadays works very well within the NGO sector, foundations. Till maybe 5 years ago, at least in Holland, the NGOs were working in a very non-commercial way, like the stereotypical image of NGOs, people working there their whole life, and if you want to change anything, it's just not going to happen because people said they tried it 30 years before and it didn't work. But now it's changing, because also WordPress Photo, it's harder to find donors, so we have to change our way of thinking. And so I basically just applied, and I also said, I think I started my letter with, I know I'm not the usual suspect, because I'm just a business dude, but I will explain you why I think I should be a great addition to the team. And then they just chose me. So it was some luck and some hard work.
One question. Do you have any ideas that you can share with us on alternatives to mail
Well, I'm sure there should be a way, but I also think it's just very, very hard. So if I'm correct, there is a government protection program here in the city. But on the other hand, photographers do not trust the government, so they don't use the protection. So it's probably, well, the government has a very important role, but I'm not too sure how you can steer this. So what, for example, the Committee to Protect Journalists is doing, they are monitoring and they are sending out a lot of messages, and they also wrote a letter to your president, as in to change the situation, especially after the journalist was killed here in the city. So it's just about, I think it's just about pointing out the atrocities, pointing out, or making at least them known to the world, making people aware. And maybe there should also be an international solution. But then the 9 out of the 10 journalists that get killed are the journalists working for the local newspapers, so the smaller media outlets. And of course, again, if you look at news value, if one journalist from a major newspaper gets killed, or if you get killed live on television like 2 or 3 days ago, it makes the headlines. But then if it's just, just is not the right word, but if it's a journalist from a smaller newspaper, it's not going to make the headlines, so you're not going to raise awareness. But this should change, because there's actually no difference. It doesn't matter what newspaper you represent. It's that you are a journalist and trying to spread information, and whether you do it for a smaller or a bigger or a huge media outlet, it should not matter.
I have a question. How is World Press Photo adjusting to a media change other than the jury selection of the photos?
So what we did, 6 years ago, we started with our multimedia contest. There's different categories in this. This was also a reply to the demand from the industry. We're actually still thinking about a better word, because multimedia, it's just not precise enough. It's just too multimedia. Well, what is it? So there we have a short feature. So for people who create videos for about 5 minutes, or longer features, interactive design, because more and more work is interactive, because of course of the internet. If you maybe remember the NSA files, it's a very well done document where you can, in a very easy way, they translated the NSA documents that were, how do you say that, released. I mean, there was huge piles of information that you just cannot go through yourself, but they came up with this interactive design to facilitate the viewer and to make it easier. And in the contest itself, and we still just talk about photography, this year we came up with a new category. It's called the long-term projects. And the reason why we did this is because more and more photographers are working on projects for a longer time. So they're investing years and years and years to get to know the subject, to make it perfect. And now photographers can enter up to 30 photos into this category, where in the other categories you can only enter 10 photos. So in this way we try to facilitate the industry as much as possible. Thanks.
Is there like a specific event or reason why World Press Photo was created?
Yeah, it was just in 1955. The basic thought was raising awareness. We already had a Dutch contest called the Silver Camera, and that was a pretty popular one in Holland. But back then they wanted to raise awareness for international photography and bring this to the people, because you can remember or imagine 60 years ago, it wasn't so easy to get information. You really had to buy it, whereas now you can find it everywhere. So that was the basic thought.
What is the relationship between written journalism and photojournalism from your point of view nowadays?
Between what, sorry?
Written journalism and photojournalism, the relationship.
What was the first one, sorry? Written, sorry. Well, I think it's more and more connected. You can, well, what we just talked about, it's very hard to just be a photographer. So you also sort of have to be a good writer. And of course, all or many of the photographers are now also their own agency with by using social media. So, and by using social media, you should at least know how to engage your audience. But also, still, it's still very popular among photojournalists to make photo books, to sort of summarize their work in one piece, and then you also need texts. But the interesting thing is, we receive the photos, and photographers cannot enter without the caption, without text. But then if you read the captions, you see that photographers many times are not the best writers, because it's just, you know, we read this information to the jury, and the jury looks at each other and is like, what is this? And then they just judge the photo, and then we try to contact the photographer and like, what are you actually showing? But especially, I mean, there's a lot of Chinese participants nowadays. This year we had 120 participants from Mexico, which is 5%, which is pretty good. But I think China was about 500 to 600. But then you receive those captions. And that's really, really difficult sometimes, because Google Translate is not working so well from Chinese to English. More questions?
Any more questions? No?
All right.
One more question.
Ah.
Which are the countries that are more interested in this kind of context?
They're more interested to have the exhibition? Well, of course, Holland. We have about 7 or 8 exhibitions in Holland, and then we're talking about Amsterdam, but also these tiny little villages with 5,000 people. Germany, I would say Mexico. There's always a huge interest. I was in San Cristobal in March. It was just very popular, but of course many times there's a financial constraint, because the exhibition, we work with a rental fee to cover our costs. We are a foundation, so we don't make a profit, but transport of the exhibition is quite expensive. We have a big presence in Australia and New Zealand also. And well, as you can see there, our presence is the biggest in the Western countries. And that's also related to financial resources. And that's something we're trying to change, to bring this example of press freedom to the countries where it's needed most. And therefore, I'm very happy that we're gonna work with Canon to bring the exhibition to more places, to do more lectures. This has all been arranged by Canon, so I'm just very happy that that also Canon Mexicana really invests a lot of time to bring this to you, so to talk about it, to bring the exhibition to the museum, and in this way we'll increase our impact, because that is what for us it's all about. It's just about the impact.
Well, Lawrence, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Canon Mexico, and all of you being here. Let's give it a hand. Simplemente reiterar que está hasta el 27 de septiembre, 27, ¿verdad? La exposición en el Museo Franz Mayer. ¿Cierra los lunes o qué día es el que cierra? Creo que cierra los lunes, ¿no? Sí. Si les interesa esta parte de transmedia, voy a organizar un taller en las primeras 2 semanas de noviembre de documental transmedia, que es un poco a lo que yo me dedico y de lo que está hablando Lawrence, que ya hay una nueva categoría al respecto. Si no están familiarizados con esto, a quien les interese, pues échense un clavado al tema. En verdad son las tendencias en medios de comunicación y que combinan un montón de competencias que ustedes desarrollan a lo largo de la carrera. Agradecerles también a ustedes, por supuesto al equipo del Laboratorio de Convergencia Digital que nos apoya en montar este espacio, y pues Gracias de nuevo a todos. Que tengan un gran fin de semana. Saluden a Lawrence, sí, ya, otra Lawrence, one more. Saluden a Lawrence.